So, you're into D&D, but all you want out of the game is to become an actual dragon, soaring through the skies and blasting anything that moves with your breath weapon. Well, it just so happens that there is a monk subclass that can make that a reality. Let's discuss the way of the Ascendant Dragon. Hi there, I'm just a second level fighter who likes talking about Dungeons and Dragons, and if you'd like to see more content like this, then consider subscribing to my channel. But enough of that, today we're tackling a very special subclass. If you're anything like me, then even the mention of a player character that has anything to do with dragons gets you fired up. And I'm very happy to say that the Way of the Ascendant Dragon is about as dragony as it gets. This subclass does it all, the wings, the elemental damage, and of course the breath weapon, all to unleash the mighty power of dragons. Now, the Ascendant Dragon Monk was originally released in Fizban's Treasury of Dragons, one of my favorite books in 5e, mostly because it focuses entirely on dragons, obviously. Anyway, if you weren't aware, monks are broken now. It's great, particularly if you're an Ascendant Dragon Monk. Even when this subclass was released, however, it took the supernatural nature of the monk and kicked it up a few notches. Dragon monks are entirely unique when compared to their counterparts. They can effectively deal with groups of enemies through area of effect damage, something that is pretty rare for monk subclasses. They also take the lessons of aerial supremacy to heart from their draconic inspirations. In other words, they are an absolute nightmare for anything that dares to show off a flying speed in their presence. So, whether you choose for your monk to have been taught all they know by an ancient dragon, or to have studied and practiced their craft in the ambient power left over by one's presence, just know that this subclass is on the stronger side, and it absolutely delivers on the amazing fantasy and flavor it promises. Alright, enough fluff. Let's dive straight into the subclass features that you get at 3rd level. Draconic Disciple is a neat collection of smaller features that serve as sprinkles and sauce for the main event to come. You learn the tongue of dragons and gain Draconic as a language that you can speak, read, and write. If you already know Draconic when you get this feature, then you can choose another language. You also get Draconic Strike, which lets you replace the damage type of your unarmed strikes with your choice of acid, cold, fire, lightning, or poison, the elemental damage types associated with dragons, or at least the chromatic and metallic ones. You also get to choose a different option with every attack if you want. This can be used to overcome resistance or even exploit a vulnerability, but sadly Draconic Strike does get overshadowed by a base monk feature you get later on. Lastly, you are imbued with a Draconic Presence. Whenever you fail a Charisma Intimidation or Charisma Persuasion check, you can re-roll the result. And you can keep doing this with successive checks until you eventually turn a fail into a success, at which point you need to take a long rest before you can try again. Reasonably decent considering you are definitely not a Charisma heavy class. The next feature you get at 3rd level is much simpler than the first, but this is where the actual power and excitement lies. Breath of the Dragon is of course a miniature version of a dragon's breath weapon that you can harness by replacing one of your unarmed strikes that you make with the attack action. So not one made as part of your bonus action or reaction. You choose whether the effect is a 20-foot cone or 30-foot long 5-foot wide line. So you get the best of both worlds and can adjust to hit the highest number of targets in any given situation. Your breath weapon requires a dexterity saving throw dealing half damage on a success, and it deals your choice of acid, cold, fire, lightning, or poison, once again allowing you to pick and choose with each use. You get to roll 2 martial arts dice for the damage, and this scales up to 3 at level 11, which, considering that martial arts dice range from a d6 to a d12 over time, is actually reasonable damage for a martial class. This feature obviously scales with wisdom, so you are going to want to have a decent score. And you can use the Breath of the Dragon an amount of times equal to your proficiency bonus, after which you need to expend a resource to use it again. 2 key points specifically, but that brings up a small issue. You see, The Way of the Ascendant Dragon was published before the 2024 PHB, and as such it refers to some of the old wording used for the monk in the 2014 PHB. Breath of the Dragon and some of the other features require you to spend key points, something that doesn't exist anymore. Instead, they were renamed to focus points. Okay, so there are 2 ways to approach this. You can either accept that wording in previous books is different, but it still refers to something that exists. Then you can make a very small and manageable leap in logic to get there and allow it in your games. Or you can take the lawful evil approach and have this subclass be basically unplayable because the wording is technically different and therefore doesn't work. Whatever path you go down is yours and your group's choice. Personally, I just wish the D&D community had gotten a better explanation of backwards compatibility within the 2024 Player's Handbook. But we didn't, so let confusion reign, I guess. Anyway, small rant aside, let's move on to 6th level where we get another iconic dragon-themed feature. Wings Unfurled allows you to access a pair of spectral draconic wings whenever you use your Step of the Wind feature. This has some unintended interactions because Step of the Wind can now be used for free on every single turn. This makes this feature a bit stronger than when it was first published, however you can still only use this feature a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus per long rest, so it isn't broken or anything. When you do pop out your wings, they last until the end of your turn and give you a flying speed equal to the speed you use to travel on the ground. Monks have a higher base speed than any other class, so you can easily reach some respectable flight speeds, especially since you have to dash to use this feature, so your speed is basically doubled. Once again, we have another language issue here. The feature refers to your walking speed, and surprise, surprise, that also isn't a thing anymore. We now just call it speed. So choose between rules as written or allowing this subclass to do its thing. At level 11, you get Aspect of the Worm. This allows you to exude a draconic aura as a bonus action. The aura itself is a 10-foot radius and lasts for 1 minute. When you use this ability, you can choose whether it is an aura of frightful presence or resistance. For the frightful presence, you choose one creature within your aura to make a wisdom saving throw or become frightened for 1 minute. You can keep using a bonus action while the aura is up to force another save, which can be on a different creature in the aura. However, if a creature is frightened of you, they can repeat their saving throw at the end of each of their turns. This fear effect isn't tremendously strong, mostly because it only targets a single creature and uses your bonus action, something you may want to keep to either fly or deal more damage, but it's neat that it lasts a while. The resistance aura is much simpler. When you activate it, you and your allies get resistance to acid, cold, fire, lightning, or poison damage for the duration. Once again, you can choose a different damage type each time you use this feature. This is the stronger of the two options and will probably see more play in game. Now, once you use this feature, you can't do so again until you finish a long rest, or unless you spend key points, which we've established are just focus points if you want them to be. Finally, at 17th level, you get your capstone feature, Ascendant Aspect, and it's pretty great. This is another feature that gives you a trio of smaller features. Augment Breath allows you to pay 1 key point, one focus point, maybe, but it lets you spend a resource whenever you use your Breath of the Dragons feature to increase the area of effect to a 60-foot cone or a 90-foot line, which is no joke. It also increases the damage to 4 rolls of your martial arts die, which are d12s at this point, so some respectable damage. You also get a permanent 10 feet of blind sight, making fighting unseen enemies much easier. Nothing is safe from your incredibly limited draconic eyeballs. Finally, Explosive Fury makes it so that you release an explosion of acid, cold, fire, lightning, or poison damage whenever you use your Aspect of the Worm feature, affecting any creatures of your choice within the aura. And you guessed it, you get to choose which damage type you use with each use of this feature. The damage it deals is 3d10 on a failed dexterity save, or no damage on a success, which is genuinely bad for a 17th level character. However, it's just more area of effect damage, something that is always appreciated on a martial character. Alright, let's cover a few things to keep in mind from the base monk class. As a monk, your core identity is martial arts. It is also your core feature. This allows you to make attacks with monk weapons and unarmed strikes while using dexterity for the attack and damage rolls. You can also use dexterity to determine the DC of any grappling or shoving you do as part of an unarmed strike. Monk weapons are basically any simple weapon or any martial weapon that has the light property, so it is a pretty limited list. On top of that, you can just make an unarmed strike as a bonus action for no cost. And then you can replace the damage die of monk weapons and your unarmed strikes with your martial arts die. This scales up from a d6 at level 1 and becomes a d12 by 17th level. To use all of this though, you need to not be wearing any armor or wielding a shield, ever. Monks like loose-fitting clothing and their birthday suits. It is what it is. You also have the most broken armor class calculation with unarmored defense. This basically means that you take your dexterity and wisdom modifiers, add them together, add 10, and that's your AC. It's broken because a 20th level monk can have 24 AC while naked, for some reason. However, monks do have a weakness. They don't generally have too many hit points with their d8 hit die. If you do get focused down, you will fall over pretty quickly. Dexterity and wisdom are your focuses when making a monk. Most of your features require one of these ability scores or even both. Now, depending on what subclass you play, you can sometimes get away with having a lower wisdom. The Ascendant Dragon Monk isn't one of those. So pump both of these abilities and balance them if you have to. Then, Monk's focus is a big part of the monk class. This is what gives you your focus points. You can use these points for various features, but this feature itself specifically gives you 3 options. Flurry of Blows lets you make 2 unarmed strikes as a bonus action, becoming 3 unarmed strikes later on. Patient Defense and Step of the Wind can both be used without spending focus points, but they get better if you do. Patient Defense lets you take the disengage action as a bonus action, but you can take the dodge action too if you spend a focus point. And Step of the Wind, the feature you use as a dragon monk to fly, lets you take the dash action as a bonus action, but you can take the disengage action too if you spend a point and your jump distance is doubled. That last point isn't terribly consequential for us draconic-minded monks though. A few more things to keep in mind. Monks are the most mobile class by default, until you take flight into account, but you can do that too. You'll have a faster speed and be able to run across water and up vertical walls, and you'll also be able to reduce the damage you take if you do end up falling. Something that might happen more than you think when we touch on a particular combo this subclass can achieve. Stunning Strike is also the boogeyman feature of the monk. You can stun a single target once per turn or severely hinder it if they happen to succeed on their constitution save thanks to the 2024 PHB. More than that, monks have the power to punch ghosts. Their unarmed strikes eventually have the ability to deal force damage, which bypasses almost all defenses in the game. As I mentioned earlier, this is unfortunately why your Draconic Strike feature is kind of useless. Oh, and monks can catch arrows and projectiles and even magic, and sometimes, when the time is right, they can throw it all back at their attacker or someone unlucky enough to be in the general vicinity. One other thing I'll mention, monks no longer have resource issues. You regain all of your focus points more regularly than you did in the 2014 PHB version of this class, so spamming out your abilities is now just a thing that you can do, and you can keep it up for quite a while. This is great for Dragon Monks too, because they only actually need to spend their focus points once they've used their features a few times. Right, let's cover a few feats that you may want to consider as an Ascendant Dragon Monk. First off, let me teach you about the hidden technique that dragons really should deploy in combat more often, the art of dragging and dropping. So, if you take the Grappler feat, which I highly recommend you do whenever you choose to play this subclass, you don't spend extra movement when moving while grappling a creature. This extends to your flying speed. So, connecting the dots, if you grapple a creature, then use your bonus action to unfurl your wings and dash, you can fly up very high and simply declare that you end your grapple, which doesn't require an action. The sad being that you just condemned to terminal velocity, then falls down like a sack of potatoes and takes 1d6 bludgeoning damage for every 10 feet that it falls. You might also fall, but as we discussed, you take less damage from that. Then, if the creature happens to take any damage from the fall whatsoever, they immediately fall prone. This combo is amazing and will cause your DM to employ the use of ceilings very quickly. However, there is a limitation, and you can't grapple anything more than one size larger than you. But if you need it more convincing to take this feat, you can also deal damage with the same unarmed strike you use to grapple your target once per turn, and you always have advantage on attacks against creatures that you are grappling. So go ahead, drag and drop and never stop. Then we have a few feats that aren't nearly as exciting but are still pretty good. Speedy makes you faster so that you can fly higher and increase the falling damage. Alright, in all seriousness, this feat is great for a monk even if you aren't giving everyone a sudden onset of acrophobia. In addition to the speed boost, opportunity attacks made against you have disadvantage, so you're really decent at weaving in and around the battlefield. Sentinel has some strange implications. It allows you to make an opportunity attack whenever a creature within 5 feet of you hits a target other than you with an attack or takes the disengage action. Now, it's a bit cheeky, but you are technically a creature within 5 feet of yourself. So whenever you use Patient Defense or Step of the Wind to disengage, you can punch yourself in the face if you really want to. However, the real power of this feat comes in the fact that whenever you hit a creature with an opportunity attack, you reduce their speed to 0. You can choose to make an unarmed strike when you make an opportunity attack, by the way. And one of the options you can take when making unarmed strikes is to push the target, and you can push them onto the ground and knock them prone. And when you're prone, you have to spend half of your speed to get up again, and that's not something you can do if your speed just happens to be 0. Not gonna lie, but this one's a bit funny. Then, using Weapon Master, you get access to the Nick property of scimitars, daggers, light hammers, and sickles. This lets you dual wield and make an extra attack without using your bonus action. You don't add your ability modifier to the damage, but this is kinda one of the very few ways to actually deal more damage as a monk. Charger can be used to get a bit of extra damage too. If you move 10 feet before attacking something with the attack action, then you get an extra d8 damage. It's pretty decent. You also get 10 feet of extra movement whenever you take the dash action, which you will be doing pretty often. That's an extra 1d6 fall damage, by the way. Finally, just take Tavern Brawler for your origin feat every single time as a monk. This lets you reroll ones for damage you make with unarmed strikes. You can also use the damage and push option for an unarmed strike once per turn, so you can better manhandle your enemies. The other benefits are useless for monks because improvised weapons cannot be monk weapons and you already deal more damage than a d4 with your unarmed strikes, but you don't actually need them in my opinion. Moving on to species now, I have two options that fit very nicely into the drag and drop mission that you may consider pursuing with this subclass. As always, these are just gimmicky suggestions, pick whatever species you like. Goliaths have a higher base speed and can make themselves large for 10 minutes. While large, their speed is even higher and they can grapple huge-sized creatures. This means that the list of enemies you can drag and drop is just bigger. On top of that, depending on what giant ancestry you choose, you get an additional effect. The Hill Giant is most notable here because you can knock a large or smaller creature prone when you hit them with an attack, and there is no save. And if they happen to be flying when this happens and they can't hover, then they fall. Goliaths are awesome. However, another strong contender for the best dragon monk species is the tabaxi. These cat people have a climbing speed and proficiency in stealth and perception, as well as dark vision. More notably here, though, they have a little feature called feline agility. They can use this to literally double their speed for a single turn, and then they need to spend a turn without moving before they can use it again. This means that tabaxis can easily reach the 200-foot maximum fall distance when they use Step of the Wind and unfurl their wings. That's a casual 20d6 bludgeoning damage for an impromptu flying lesson you give to some poor unfortunate soul. After all, dragons are basically giant scaly cats, right? Finally, let's discuss some multiclassing options that pair well with Ascendant Dragon Monks. This is by no means an extensive list. Taking 3 levels of Ranger and choosing the Hunter subclass gets you some great options. Firstly, the Hunter allows you to take Colossus Slayer or Horde Breaker, so extra damage or an extra attack with a weapon against a nearby enemy. Then the Ranger class itself gives you weapon mastery and a fighting style. I suggest 2-weapon fighting and picking up a pair of scimitars and using the Nick mastery to make another attack as part of your attack action. On top of that, you get a few spells, like Hunter's Mark for more damage or Longstrider to go faster. Can't imagine why you'd want to do that. Ranger also focuses on dexterity and wisdom, so that's a positive. Then, becoming a champion fighter is more interesting than it sounds. Your weapon attacks and unarmed strikes crit on a 19 and a 20, and whenever you do crit, you can move up to half your speed. This is actually a fair amount of extra movement when put on the monk chassis. As a fighter, you also get weapon mastery and a fighting style, and here I make the same suggestions as with the ranger. Action Surge is also a bit of extra sauce, and maybe this time you want to use that extra action to dash or fly higher. Just saying. The Beast Barbarian is a strange but neat choice here. They can transform parts of their bodies into natural people openers like claws, teeth, or a tail. These weapons are considered simple weapons and are therefore considered monk weapons, so you can use dexterity with them and their damage dice grows. Now, if you ignore strength, then you won't get any rage bonuses to damage or reckless attack. So choosing to make a strength monk is a weird option available here, but it's not the end of the world if you don't. The claw is particularly good too, as it allows you to make an extra attack with it. On top of that, you get weapon mastery for Nick weapons. No 2-weapon fighting style this time though. But yeah, consider flavoring it so that your character is literally turning into some half-dragon hybrid thing. Drag and drop, rip and tear. Now, for the sake of completeness, I'll quickly mention the spike growth cheese grater method. You can take 3 levels of any type of druid, it really doesn't matter which one, but doing so will give you access to 2nd level druid spells. The one we're looking for here is spike growth. This spell makes a large area of needle-like thorns on the ground. Now, you can get this if you take enough levels of Ranger too, but that's just diluting the pool. You could also be a Lotus Den Halfling, but they can only grapple medium-sized creatures. And you guessed it, the goal here is to grapple someone and forcibly drag them through the thorns like a piece of cheese meeting its end. Because you absolutely took the grappler feat when making this multi-class, you can grade them into tiny specks of gore and viscera and sadness, because you can now move at your full movement speed. However, the rules for grappling don't state any specific orientation that a grappled creature takes in relation to the grappler. This is a very grey area of the rules and will absolutely be used to argue against this war crime. You'll probably also hear an argument about forced movement, so beware. This is a very explicitly cheesy interaction and will get some mixed responses and is probably something you may very well see only once. Because after that, your character is going to die to falling rocks. Apart from that, druids scale with wisdom, and they have some neat spells. Alright, that was the Way of the Ascendant Dragon Monk. I really like this one, particularly with the small breath weapons and the drag and drop potential. Although I will admit it's kinda mean. If you've made it this far in the video, then you're a legend, and I really appreciate you. What is your favorite dragon-themed subclass in 5e? Are there any that could be reflavored to be themed around dragons? Personally, I don't understand why we don't have a dragon warlock, and I could easily see the genie converted into a dragon. The vessel might be something they kept in their hoard. Just a thought. But yeah, that'll do it for this one. Cheers.